So good. Good morning and welcome, Leah Feldon.
Thank
So
you.
glad to have you here. And as we begin, we're just going to share a few logistics. I think you know that this interview is scheduled for up to 75 minutes. When 10 minutes remain, a slide will be shown on the screen, noting that time check. And then a second slide will be shown when 5 minutes remain. And today the commission is going to ask the same list of questions of both finalists. And that being said, these 75 minutes are yours. Different questions might take longer or shorter period of time for you. If you have remaining time after we get through the list, you can reflect on them and go back to a point if you wish. This is really your time to engage with these questions. We're going to kind of round robin the questions. I'll begin. And Leah, do you have any questions for us before we begin?
Don't think I do.
Well, again, welcome and thank you for spending this time with us today.
Thank you.
And I'll get us underway. So what would be your approach to leading an organization that is on the precipice of transformational change toward an organization defined by diversity, inclusivity, equity, and justice?
Thank you. It's a great question to start off with. And I really appreciate the word precipice. I think that's very apt to DEQ's current state. We may be on the verge of some unfamiliar territory when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice and belonging, but it's really exciting to see the opportunities that are before us. So I think first, for myself, I feel like really working into DEI issues starts with self-reflection, and it's an individual journey first and foremost, and it's something that takes some deep self-awareness and learning. So personally, I am trying to draw on some of my past life experiences and figure out how those lived experiences of mine can be used to help the agency and kind of bring those together. So when I say some personal experiences, I'll just name a few examples and then talk a little bit about where I think we're going with the agency and where I'd like to take the agency. So for myself, some of my work with these issues really started in undergraduate school. And I'm not sure that I realized when I went into undergrad that I would be working in some of these issues, but I had the privilege to, partially thanks to some amazing professors. But in studying sociology, one of the first things that I really worked on was the unjust welfare system in Dayton, Ohio. And that was one of the first eye-opening experiences where I got to start to see some intersections of income inequality, access issues, and race issues coming together in that system. Also during undergrad, I did volunteer work at the local prison, and my job there was to teach inmates who were interested in getting their GEDs, mathematics and grammar, so that they could obtain a GED. So getting into that system on a very personal basis and talking to people and getting to hear their stories, I think was some early eye-opening work. After college, I moved to Baltimore. This was the year before I went to law school, and I did a year of volunteer work in Baltimore, Maryland. When I was there, I lived in community with a volunteer organization, and we worked at some different places in Baltimore. I worked at a medical facility that primarily served people with HIV and AIDS. And again, the really vast intersectionalities that I became aware of there and learned about was profound and has stuck with me my entire life. I worked with people who were recently coming out of incarceration, people who were struggling with gender identity issues, certainly people struggling financially, homelessness, drug addiction, and all with an underlying diagnosis of HIV and AIDS. And so I was a caseworker in then. And again, really a lot of my understanding and my value system, I think, comes from that work. As I moved through life and after law school and started to work more in the legal field and environmental fields, I really gained an interest in Native American cultural work. I started learning really about this through work at the Port of Portland. That was an assignment that I had as an intern there, was to research and understand the different laws that come together on the federal level, on the state level, for when cultural resources are found at sites. The Port of Portland does a lot of dredging, and this happens. They come up with cultural resources, and they needed some help understanding more the intersectionality of the laws around that. So that's just a little bit of my background and some of the experiences that I draw on. And that's something that I think at DEQ, for leadership, management, staff, all of us, we're going to have to draw on some of our personal experiences, and some may have more than others. Some may have what I would consider true lived experiences, that they have been part of a marginalized community, which I would not consider myself part of. So I have to draw on these other experiences, and I have to do more work to understand these issues. But I think bringing that personal learning into the agency is what we're being called upon to do. And if I were to become DEQ's leader, we're going to act on that. That's something that we are going to continue to work on. So where's DEQ? Again, as the question states, kind of on a precipice, I think is really accurate. We have some infrastructure now at DEQ that we didn't have really 3 years ago. And that's just been built over the last few years. So we now have a DEI council. We have 2 DEI positions. One is more of a coordinator position. One is more of a research analyst position. We have several affinity groups at DEQ, which I think have probably so far been the most successful piece. It's really a place where people can come together and share experiences and think about how we can do better at DEQ. We've also, over the last couple of years, hired a consultant, Engaged to Change, and they are working with us on 3 areas primarily. One is training, and that training has started for the leadership team and the DEI Council. That's very intentional that we are doing this training with leadership and the DEI Council at the same time, because I will raise an area that we need to work on, I think, quickly, and something I would be working on in my first year is to really bring the council and leadership together in our visioning for DEI at DEQ. So far, those relationships have not fully been established. That bridge has not been built. And so, frankly, there's been some separate tracks. And I think that with the good intentions that everyone has, and with training that we are each getting, we're building a vocabulary. We're building an ability to come together on these values and talk about where we want to take the agency next. Engaged to Change is also working on an organizational assessment, right? This needs to be a much broader effort than just leadership and the DEI Council. You can't change the culture of an agency or really embed these values in a meaningful way if you only have a couple of groups that are learning and role modeling. The role modeling is important, I think, but we're going to need to spread training and understand the needs of the agency through the organizational assessment. So that's why we are doing that. Engaged to Change is also working with us a bit on our strategic planning efforts. So again, I think this effort, it's really going to take everyone. It's going to take staff, it's going to take the union, it's going to take management, it's going to take leadership. And we really need to build the agency of belonging that we're all hoping for and that we want to see, and figure out mechanisms to sustain that vision. I want this agency to be a place of true belonging for everyone who comes here. A lot of people come to DEQ for the mission, and we all hold that in common. And everyone who wants to be here, I believe, should feel like they belong, and they should know that DEQ is a place where diversity is welcome and sought after. So I think that's really what's upon us over the next year. I'm really excited for where DEQ can go in this space. So thank you for the question.
Thank you.
So I get to ask the second question, Leah, which is, how does the environmental regulatory information to elected or appointed officials at government levels, impacted community members, and also regulated entities?
Yes, thank you very much, Commissioner Kyle. I do have a fair amount of experience in this area over my 17 years at DEQ. And I think my initial position at DEQ, my first couple of positions maybe were really helpful in this area. I started at DEQ as staff. I actually started as a temporary staff and moved into a permanent position, which I was very excited about. And that was as an environmental law specialist in our Office of Compliance and Enforcement. And I did that for 4 years and then became the manager of that office. So I would say starting there is a great place to get your feet wet in explaining why you're doing what you're doing. That's the Office of DEQ that issues notices of violations, civil penalties, and orders. And so communication is really at the heart of all of that. In that world, first, we're communicating with internally to make sure that everyone understands what we're doing and why, and that it follows our rules and our processes. Then we're usually communicating next with a responsible party and explaining to them the facts as we see it. But soon that becomes an explanation really to the greater public. Sometimes that's communities that may have been impacted by the violations. Sometimes it's legislators who are interested in the issue for their constituents in the particular area. So I think from an enforcement perspective, early on, I had a lot of experience with explaining what we were doing and why, and helping to bridge the facts of the situation with the law and DEQ's authorities and why DEQ is involved in a particular situation. I would also, I want to give some kudos here also to our communications group. In general, when it comes to communicating environmental and regulatory information, I think there's been times in my history at DEQ when we've not been so great at that. And I think there's been times when we're better. And I would say that over the last 5 to 6 years, we've been a lot better. And I do give a lot of credit to our communications group for helping DEQ with that. And it's been a lesson for me how important that team is, so that we have professional communications experts that can help all of us. A few specific examples, though, to get to these elected or appointed officials at government levels, impacted community members, and regulated entities. I think one example in particular that I was heavily involved in and was communicating with all of those folks and more was with the air toxics issues that came about with Bullseye Glass about 6.5 years ago, almost 7 years ago now, I guess. And that was a situation that came at us fast. We were unprepared, and we really needed to buckle down, work with our partners, the Oregon Health Authority, and start determining what is it that we know and what is it that we don't know, and being transparent about that. What are the facts that we have right now, and what is it that we're unsure of right now, and what are we doing about that? How are we going to fill those gaps? And those communications needed to occur certainly first and foremost with the community members, also first and foremost with the companies involved. And so I think that was a situation that that really changed DEQ and the way that we want to make sure that we are aware of what we can do in a situation like that. And certainly, hopefully, we won't have a situation like that again, but I know that we'd be more prepared for the situation. A great thing came out of it, the Cleaner Air Oregon program, because really what that situation showed us is we did not have all the authorities that we needed to protect public health. And so there was a learning there. I would say other examples where we need to do this well, and examples where I have had to do this happens in the cleanup realm, when we need to talk to folks about cleanup of properties and to what level those properties get cleaned up. The J.H. Baxter property is an example, and just helping folks understand when you have residential properties that are abutting industrial properties, that's a challenge. The industrial property is not going to have the same cleanup levels as the residential properties. And it's a tough land use issue when we have those things coming together, but that's part of DEQ's job is to talk about that and explain what the law says, what the cleanup levels are, and what we're going to be doing in a situation like that. Permitting in general, I would say, is an area where DEQ needs to keep working on how we communicate to folks at all different levels to help people understand why we're putting the conditions in permits that we do, and why the conditions are necessary and appropriate in those situations. I think that's what I have for that question. Thanks.
Okay, my turn. Leah, as you know, the landscape is big. But the headquarters and the bulk of the agency's staff are here in the Willamette Valley, now Willamette Valley. The agency's influence, influence and authority reaches all corners. So with that preface, what are some strategies, skills, or tools that you use to ensure your accessibility and responsiveness to stakeholders and partners?
Mm-hmm.
Describe your approach to engagement with rural and urban communities.
Thank you, Commissioner Addington. I appreciate this question. I think I've grown in this area and learned quickly in moving to different positions how important the accessibility is. And a lot of this came about, I would say, starting again with my work in Cleaner Air Oregon and all through my time as deputy director. But first and foremost, I naturally enjoy being accessible to people. I think that's part of public service. I think it's part of being a public servant. It doesn't mean that every single employee, at DEQ can talk to everybody every time. But I think when there are important issues and people have concerns, the deputy needs to be available and the director needs to be available. And I enjoy that part of this job. I answer my cell phone. I call people back. I don't automatically turn people to someone else until I know that perhaps someone else is going to have better expertise and help somebody better than I can. Just a quick anecdote. I remember during the Cleaner Air Oregon period, I think there were some community members and business folks alike who had not experienced a great accessibility with DEQ. And I recall that there were certain stakeholders that were upset and surprised that I had met with other stakeholders. And I said, of course I've met with those stakeholders, and I'm meeting with you, and I will meet with anybody who asks to meet over this situation. So from that moment on, I kind of decided that that's how I was going to operate. When people have concerns, I will be accessible. In terms of the rural and urban and rural community issues, I think there's a divide that we have to recognize. It would be inappropriate to be ignorant to that. But I don't believe that we need to allow it to eclipse our vision for the policies that serve all Oregonians, whether they are in our rural or urban areas. DEQ's mission to be a leader in restoring, maintaining, and enhancing Oregon's air, land, and water applies to everyone. This mission doesn't know the rural and urban boundaries. I think that sometimes there will be mechanisms that we can use differently in those different areas and respect the realities of different geographies, different populations, certainly different landscapes, even different climates in Oregon. And so we need to take those factors into consideration, and the economics of the different areas are really critical. But at the end of the day, our mission is intended to enhance everyone's environment everywhere in the state. So I think to the extent that our policies are not doing that, or we're alerted to the fact that a policy might make other important considerations like economic opportunities harder, we need to consider this in our decision making. And we always need to consider the fiscal and social impacts of our decisions while remaining mission focused. I think environmental justice really comes to play here as a bridge between urban and rural issues, because really the environmental justice issues that face folks, I see a lot of congruity really between the issues facing urban and rural folks when it comes to environmental justice. Sometimes the access issues and economic issues, they really do cross those boundaries. So for myself, I really try and get to understand those issues. I like talking to folks in the communities about the difficult issues there and listening and learning. And I always do learn. And that's helpful to me. I'll just air a quick personal note. I like to read Digger magazine, if anyone's familiar with that, cover to cover every month, produced by our Oregon Association of Nurseries. I also read The Other Oregon, and I love those two publications. I think they're fascinating. And something I've noticed about both of those is they're talking about the same things that DEQ is talking about. And so let's have that conversation. They're talking about climate challenges. They're talking about water scarcity issues. They're talking about water reuse issues. They're talking, about drought, about erosion, about, how are we going to manage with replanting after wildfire, lack of seedlings. And so I think there are a lot of places that we can bridge this divide. I do want to say, I think that DEQ can do a better job in that dialogue. I would like for our staff, and I would encourage, if I were to be DEQ's leader, just encourage people not to start from a place of division and start from a place of how do these policies benefit everyone? And if they don't benefit everyone, we need to ask why. Because we know that equality in policies doesn't necessarily mean equity. And again, that transcends the urban rural divide. So I think we need to be very cognizant of our policy making. I would say that I am also, I try and be just really transparent, and I try and connect my decision-making back to DEQ's authorities and the law and explain why I'm making a decision that I'm making. And when I've talked to some folks about certain decisions, I'll raise the issues in the lower Umatilla Basin groundwater management area as an example. Sometimes the ultimate decisions that I have made there over the last few years have not been popular. It's not what folks maybe wanted to see ultimately, but I've taken the time to explain the reasoning and how I got to my decision. And generally, I've found that that reasoning has been respected and understood. And so I will always do that. I think we owe everyone good process, transparent process and explanations. And I really look forward to communicating with all communities the benefits that DEQ's policies can provide. I just want to give maybe of a policy that I think is going to have some really could have some really great benefits across these boundaries, just briefly. The climate protection program, I know that has, it's been a controversial program. We are in early stages of implementation. I think that program through the community climate investments program and just by the regulation itself is going to have really strong benefits, both for urban and rural communities. On the one hand, those community climate investments, they provide a pathway for compliance for businesses that can't, with their own compliance instruments, get under the cap. So there's a way to get into compliance with those credits. Those credits then go directly to benefit lower income and environmental justice communities, which includes rural communities. And so I think there's a win-win there. And I think ultimately for businesses that operate in Oregon, where we have a climate protection program, this is going to actually bolster and enhance their corporate sustainability goals. And I think it can really provide businesses an opportunity to be more competitive when it comes to incentives and grants to operate in a state with that program. So that's just an example. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. What strategies have you used in previous positions to help engage a large workforce made up of many different disciplines? And how would those strategies apply to its varied programs and expertise? And how do you ensure strong employee retention? And I can repeat any portions of that if.
Okay, thank you. Yes, this is a good question. Engaging a large workforce with many different disciplines is certainly DEQ. And, about a little more than a decade ago, we were at this level of just about at this level of number of employees that we have now, which is just over 800. But in most of my time at DEQ, we've had more like in the 600s in terms of employees. And so at my time, I've seen, at least in the last 10 years, I've seen a fair amount of growth at DEQ. And we've also seen more and more programs, more programs have come our way in that time. So the more just in numbers that we grow and the number of programs and the more specialties, it can be easy, I think, for the agency to become siloed. Certainly, COVID has done no favors in that arena. We're not seeing each other as much anymore, and I regret that. So I certainly want to find ways that we can bring people together, but I think there are some overarching connective tissues, if you will, within DEQ that really make a difference. Number one, I'll come back to our mission. A lot of people come to DEQ for the mission, and that's a mission that connects the entire agency. And the mission itself talks about air, land, and water. But, our staff, they may be experts in those particular arenas, but I see our staff looking for ways all the time that we can connect those. When our staff talk about toxics, they want to talk about how it is that toxics enter the air, land on the land, and wash into the water, and where we need to be looking at all three of those arenas, right? Just as an example. There are some overarching issues that are really prominent at DEQ right now that I think as we work through them, and they will be difficult, but will ultimately really bring the workforce together. And that brings us back to our DEI discussion and environmental justice. Both of those are areas that we are making a fair amount of progress on. We have a lot of work to do. But I think that if we can achieve our goals for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and come together on environmental justice, we really can move the dial at DEQ for general employee satisfaction here and retention as well. If this is a place of belonging where people feel that they are connected to a mission together, I believe that's why a lot of people stay, and what will hopefully encourage others to stay. I would like to see us do more celebrating of our successes. DEQ is a very busy, fast-paced agency. And, a lot comes at us all the time. Celebrating our successes is something that can bring us together. And so I really look forward to doing more of that. One thing I've been trying to do just in my time as interim director, which has just been since September, so it hasn't been long, but I've been sending a lot more director messages just out to all staff, just to keep people engaged on what's going on in the agency. It might be an update on the governor transition. It might be an update on strategic planning. It might be a message of gratitude at Thanksgiving time. It might be a message of sorrow when we have, national disasters and tragedies. But I'm really trying to connect folks with those messages. And I think that's been healthy for me. And I hope that others are feeling more of a sense of connectivity with that. I think we do need to consider more where programs can share best practices. And I'm looking forward to that, and in particular with environmental justice, which I'll talk about in a moment. I think one, just for a few brass tacks examples of where the agency is going to see its work coming together. We do have the governor's expectations of all agencies. And for DEQ, we intend to set up a dashboard that shows folks internally and externally how we're doing on all of those expectations. And so staff can expect to see that over the next year. Again, over the next year, I think we are going to be focusing on progress in terms of relationships between leadership and the DEI Council and all folks that have interest in working on diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. In terms of environmental justice, just want to turn there for a moment. I think this is probably the area where I'm most excited to see the agency come together for a common mission. Environmental justice is not stated in our mission. Perhaps it should be, perhaps it will be someday, but it is, to my mind, and if I were the director in my leadership, it is absolutely part of our mission. Again, we know that equality doesn't necessarily mean equity. So we are going to have to take a look at our policies and our implementation to really understand the impacts. Just because we have laws that require the same thing of every entity, i.e. equality, does that mean that the folks on the ground that are being impacted are experiencing equity? I think that's the question that we need to start asking, and we can do that as an agency because that brings together all of us. It brings together our air, land, water programs. It brings together our laboratory And really, I think it's a passion for many staff at DEQ. So we have the passion there, and now it's time to build some infrastructure. We are hoping in this legislative session to get 2 environmental justice positions at DEQ. And I think that would really help us start to get some framework around the work that we're doing around environmental justice. We do have a work group within DEQ right now, and they are making progress already in terms of mapping work, which will start in Oregon soon. We have the federal EJ screen, but the state is working toward an Oregon mapping tool for environmental justice communities. And our staff are already working on some of the technical pieces that I think will feed into that. Community engagement. We really are, I think, able to start figuring out some of our best strategies for community engagement. Under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, there are requirements that we have for engagement and accessibility. And we have really been working over the last few months to make sure that we are meeting those expectations. But I would like to go beyond that. Sure, let's meet the expectations. But what can we do in Oregon to bring the right people to the table when there are going to be community impacts from an action that we have? I've been bringing some of these conversations about environmental justice to our environmental policy and implementation coordination team, also fondly known as EPIC, which is a group of the leadership team. And in that team, we're starting to have these conversations. How are we going to take some of the federal framework that is coming and look at the state framework that we've been given by both Governor Brown and Governor Kotek, and make that reality through DEQ. Frankly, DEQ should be at the forefront of ensuring environmental justice. We are the environmental protection agency for the state. And so we need to be on that front line. We're going to need other agency partners in that. We're going to need the Oregon Health Authority, and we're going to need some of our sister agencies that also have regulatory responsibilities too, like the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Forestry. I feel confident that we will have partners in our environmental justice work, and I really look forward to those collaborations. I think you can see environmental justice starting to show in some of our policies already. In Cleaner Air Oregon is a completely health-based, risk-based program. That is a way of looking at environmental justice. That's the way that we look at impacts to humans versus equal emissions from sources. So I think it's a great example, and we can launch from that and look at other areas. I've already talked about the climate protection program and the connections to environmental justice there. I'm very excited about our Clean Water State Revolving Fund, which just recently proposed, and this commission adopted rules that enhance that program's ability to get more dollars out in the form of principal forgiveness, and also expands the criteria, the affordability criteria, so that more communities will be eligible for those monies. Finally, on this piece, I do want to say that I think there are opportunities for businesses in the environmental justice world as well. And as director, I would encourage businesses to work with us, and that we would help businesses in 2 ways in particular. Supplemental environmental projects. These are an opportunity when a company does have a penalty and they want to settle that penalty. They have the opportunity to put some of those monies towards a supplemental environmental project rather than just paying the penalty outright. Let's look together at driving those dollars towards environmental justice communities. Let's figure out how we can make the best use of those funds. And I would say another way, another opportunity for business is what I will call early action permitting. let's talk early on in the process of the permitting and look at mitigation measures before all the plans are decided upon. Let's figure out together ways that we can make the permitting process go smoother and get some community benefits early in that conversation. The earlier we talk, the more that we can do, I believe, to help communities. And finally, I do just want to say for the whole agency, I intend for us to continue building our tribal relationships. I think we have good tribal relationships, and I don't think that's enough. We do not have, I would say, the type of coordination with tribes that I would like to see that actually incorporates some of their ideas and means of getting to environmental outcomes. And I think there could be a much stronger partnership there. And there's opportunities for that. Like I say, I think many of the relationships are there, which is great. And I would like to use that as a starting point to build on our partnerships with tribes.
Thank you. Okay. What are some strategies, skills, and tools you use to critically analyze and weigh or balance the positions of internal staff, advocates, and administrators?
Thank you, Vice Chair Barrasso. I have to smile a bit. I wonder if this is where, maybe I drive people crazy a little bit. This is the definition of of me. I do like to critically analyze and weigh and balance positions because I have a legal background, and maybe that's also just part of my nature, not nurture. I do have a legal background. I really enjoyed my time at Lewis and Clark Law School studying environmental and natural resources law, and really my entire career has been in the policy and public service realm for the most part. Doing this analysis and weighing and balancing of the positions is it's something I enjoy, and it's really important. Again, there's the law that we need to look at. We need to apply the facts in each situation to that and start there. That's the starting point. That's the basis. But I always want to be talking to people as well that are impacted. And again, some of those folks, are mentioned here in that there may be advocates that are interested in a particular issue. There may be industry that's interested in a particular issue, and hearing from them is always important. I usually learn something more than the agency, already had in terms of its fact base. So that's key. I think staff really need the freedom to be able to tell leadership their expert opinion on a situation, to say, these are the facts as we see them, and we have applied it, and this is what we're coming up with. Beyond, a legal analysis, this is an agency of science. So we really need to draw on not only our rules and regulations, but what is the science telling us? And we are certainly suited to do that here. We have an amazing laboratory of experts, and we draw upon their analysis all the time. I think we always need to be considering public health in these decisions when we're analyzing issues, and economic considerations as well. And it doesn't mean that economic considerations drive the day, but they have to be considered. And I think all of these things, again, building off of the staff expertise, can be considered together. There have been times where we might find that a policy decision would make good sense from a public health perspective. But the agency lacks resources, and we've not necessarily been given resources to do something that's being asked of us, or we haven't actually had a program set up by the legislature to do something that's being asked of us. Those are the challenging issues where, you know, we can do this critical analysis, and the science and the law might tell us that maybe there even is authority, and maybe the science says that yes, this would benefit public health, but we've not been given the ability to do it because we don't have the resources. And I think that's an important thing to continue to communicate out. And I know this commission has seen those instances, before. It's really important to me that DEQ is always communicating what resources it has and what it doesn't have. We need to be really transparent about what it takes to properly and robustly operate the programs that we have. And if we haven't been given resources to do something, I'm going to be really open and transparent about that. And the way then to take that forward, if we believe that is something we should be working on, is to have a conversation with the commission, and it's to have a conversation with the governor's office, and to have a conversation then with the legislature. If we feel that there's something new that we need to do, those are the conversations that we need to have. Far too many times in the past, I think we've been given new responsibilities without resource, and that causes us to fail in other areas. It causes us to have permit backlogs. It causes us to move too quickly. It might cause us to, not be reviewing things as thoroughly as we would like to. That's not a healthy operation. And I'm most interested in us operating everything that we are expected to do by the public in the best way we can. I think finally, I would just say I appreciate gathering information in situations and making sure that I'm talking to all the folks impacted. And I am a person that consults my leadership team. I'm not impulsive in my decision-making. I like to consult my leaders. They're all in their positions for a reason. And I have great faith in them and enjoy working with them as a team through these issues.
Thank you. So our next question is related to the previous one, but is also a little bit different. So DEQ, as you know, often faces situations where there are many competing interests at stake. What values would you rely on to help guide your decision making?
Thank you, Chair George. Yes, similar. And so I will raise some similar pieces to the last question because they are related. So certainly when we have competing interests at stake, again, I draw on my legal background. That is where this agency needs to start. What statutory authorities have we been given and which have we not been given? What do our regulations say? In many cases, when there are controversial situations and competing interests at stake, there is usually, perhaps more often than not, more than one agency involved or that should be. And so it's really important that we identify that early and work with the other agencies that have the appropriate knowledge and jurisdiction. Again, to name a few, often this might be the Department of Agriculture. Often this might be the Department of Forestry. Often it might be the Health Authority, could be the Department of Fish and Wildlife, or even Water Resources. So I think that's important to me that we are consulting with those agencies and using our authorities appropriately. Again, science. I value the science and what it is telling us and applying that to the law. Public health is really, again, not called out directly in our mission, but for me, it's in our mission. And public health is a value that I hold. It's a lot of the reason that we do everything we do here at DEQ. So when we are looking at many different competing interests, we need to be looking at public health. And I think that also means we can look at the impact to business. If we're looking to make a decision that could potentially have an acute impact, an acute immediate impact on business, we should be aware of that. And then we need to talk to folks about what that might look like. Relationships. I think I have really tried to develop some relationships over the years so that when we do have difficult conversations, I'm able to bring that relationship to bear and talk to folks about what the department is doing in those situations. So an example, again, in the Lower Umatilla Basin, there are a lot of competing interests there, and they're all important. So when you're starting with many competing interests and you really believe, as I do, that they are all important, that's a challenge. So I think at the core, though, we do need to come back to what is DEQ's role in a situation like that? And how are we going to partner to make sure that people have healthy drinking water and that folks can thrive in their businesses and in the agriculture industry there, and that we move forward in a positive way. We have to move forward in a positive way on the public health front and on the business front there. And I think that we can do that. I'm also very aware, and I will always keep talking about the fact that the challenges are beyond DEQ's authority in many cases there. And so for DEQ, we need to do everything we can to hold folks with DEQ permits accountable and make sure that we can take violation of those permits out of the equation. That shouldn't be a factor. And we can work with the businesses to make sure that that's not a factor going forward. And we're doing that now. So I believe that's our piece, and we can support our sister agencies. But I will hold on to the values that come with our mission and our authorities, and always be open to learning more and having conversations.
Thank you.
And I get to ask the last question here, which is Oregon is a big state. And we do, the mission is to protect its natural resources. And so really, this last question is, what is your visions of DEQ's mission to protect, maintain, and enhance the quality of Oregon's air, land, and water?
Well, so it's a big question. Thank you, Commissioner Kyle.
Big state, big question.
State, big question. Yes. So I think I'll draw on just some different aspects of that question and hopefully get to the heart of it. From my perspective, DEQ has really matured over the last several years and has undergone a lot of growth in many different ways. And sometimes you go through some painful experiences to experience growth. And I think we've done that. We've built up an incredible leadership team. And I think that in so many different ways, DEQ is doing better today than it has in many of my 17 years. But we're also poised to realize so much more potential. And we really need to make sure that we maintain the improved credibility that I think we have at the moment. I think we are more confident today in our regulatory responsibilities. And this is important to our communities and the business community. When communities, including the business community, know that we're doing our job according to the law, we can focus on the gaps and what we need to do to fill them. Again, with regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion and environmental justice, this really wraps back to the word precipice. We are on the precipice of transformational change. And my vision for protecting Oregon's air, land, and water includes those, because it's the people that are doing that work. And all of our people deserve a sense of belonging and inclusion at this agency, and our communities deserve justice. DEQ has many different facets, and I think all of these can really help us in our mission and help us collaborate with folks across Oregon in all of Oregon's communities. We are a collaborator. We have ways to build partnerships. We are a regulator, and we're also an agency that incentivizes. We provide technical assistance. We provide fair enforcement. We also provide a lot of pass-through dollars and incentives to help people make transitions along with the policies that we're setting. I am looking forward to developing more metrics for outcome measures at this agency. And that's part of my vision for how we will be protecting air, land, and water. We do a lot of measuring right now, and we have a system that a lot of our wonderful staff are work very hard at gathering the data for our measures. The next phase of that system is to have more what I would call outcome measures. And a lot of our staff are familiar with that term, but measuring the number of permits we do and our timeliness, those are important, and we're going to keep doing that. But measuring pollution reduced, measuring community impacts, measuring lands cleaned up. Those are some of the outcome measures that I'm hoping DEQ can really start diving into to tell the story of what we do for Oregon and measuring that. We will achieve the governor's priorities. We have many priorities and expectations set out for agencies, and under my leadership, we will achieve those. It's good governance, and it reflects a lot of our own priorities, certainly in terms of strategic planning, DEI planning, affirmative action planning. Again, part of the vision would be to celebrate successes. We all work hard with not enough celebration, and especially since COVID. So we need to do more of that to help staff see the fruits of their labor and why they are here. I think some of the things that I would like to do with the leadership team in the first few months would really be to discuss with them their ideas and hopes for this next era of DEQ leadership. If I were to become the director, just because I've been here for 17 years and have been the interim director, to me, that doesn't mean that we stick with the status quo. I would like to take this opportunity as a new director, whether it's an internal director or an external person. I think either way, it's an opportunity, and I don't want to miss it. So early on, we'd be having those conversations with leadership. What are their ideas and hopes for this next phase of leadership? What can we do better? And what do they need from me to be successful? We'd also be discussing our priorities and how we set a path toward achieving those goals and resourcing the priorities, ensuring that we're all bought into our objectives and chart a path forward together for this next phase. I think in the next 5 years, I'm excited to say now that I believe DEQ will have reduced to less than 10% its air quality permit backlog within the next 5 years. And we will have all 148 of the water quality permits in the consent judgment renewed. So that's a little bit of the 5-year progress we can have. And I'm really excited to potentially see that day. There have been times where I wasn't sure I would. And it would be lovely to achieve that. I think that in terms of environmental issues, I'll just touch on that as a last piece. Obviously, one of the most important issues of the day is climate change and mitigation and adaptation. And we're just at a really exciting moment, I think, in that arena. In Oregon, at least, and not all states can say this, we can see our path to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and meeting our goals. And it's not just aspirational anymore. And we couldn't say that even 2 years ago. So I think being on that path is really exciting. And we need to be in implementation mode. I've talked with this commission before about what I see as sort of a really powerful triumvirate occurring right now with the intersection of the technology advances, policy, and the federal dollars to build the infrastructure. So at this point, it's really now up to us to take this once in a lifetime infusion of money for infrastructure and planning and build our clean energy future. And so the climate work and several other issues, I think, water use and reuse, emerging contaminants, Recycling Act implementation, again, progress on permitting and readying our state for accepting renewable fuels and energy infrastructure, wildfire recovery, and smoke management. These are all areas where DEQ has programs, we have authorities, and we have regulations in place. And we've been given expectations and resources by the legislature. So what does that mean? That means we're in implementation mode. That is the current status, I believe, for where DEQ needs to go in the next couple of years. We need to look at all of these programs and opportunities holistically and really focus on implementation. With implementation comes measuring and auditing and making sure that we're doing things well, and a continual look at our resources. Do we have the right resources to implement these programs in the way that the legislature intended, in the way that stakeholders envisioned, and in the way that our communities expect of us? So I think the vision is not one right now of going after a bunch of new programs. The vision right now is to support all of our staff in implementing the programs that we have implemented well. I think we're on a really great path here in Oregon, and on a path that is going to be a cleaner and more sustainable environment for communities, and a more sustainable environment for businesses, a place where businesses want to locate, want to hire employees, and want to take advantage of all that Oregon has to offer. I think, again, to circle back to some of these issues that really bring us together. In reading the Other Oregon recently, there's often discussions in there about water scarcity, and we're hearing about water scarcity, groundwater scarcity issues in Southern Oregon right now. This is something that the state needs to really ramp up its conversations about. How are we going to provide water for the users? We have farmers that are cutting off part of their acreage because there's not enough water to irrigate, and irrigation districts that are restricting the amount of water that can go to those folks. tribes are seeing warming temperatures and less flow, leading to drastic reductions in the amount of fish that they have for subsistence and for cultural uses. We need to have these water conversations in Oregon. We have some great infrastructure in place, I believe now, on greenhouse gas reduction. And I think that we could use a higher level framework for planning around some water issues. So getting out a little bit into the future, I see that as a place where we need to go. That is not a DEQ only conversation by any means, not even close. It's not even only a Oregon government conversation. It's, you know, it's multiple nations, it's multiple agencies, and it's multiple community members that need to have that conversation. I think I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you very much. So by my clock, I think our time is up at 12:20. Have a few minutes, if you'd like, to revisit any of the questions. If there's another point you want to make, you're welcome to do that. You also don't need to feel obligated to do that if what you said is what you wanted to say. Commissioners, I'll ask you if you have any follow-ups on these questions that might be of interest too. No, we don't. So it's entirely up to you.
Okay. Well, given a moment, maybe I will address one thing that I was not asked, which is, why do I want this job? And I think it's important to address. I didn't come to DEQ with aspirations to be the director someday. That certainly wasn't in my sights 17 years ago. I've been at the agency for 17 years now, though, and I've had the privilege of many different positions, and actually in several different areas of the state, which has been amazing. And I feel like I've been given a lot, and a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, and a lot of privileges in these positions. And I'd like to give that back. But what better use of that knowledge than to infuse it back into the agency? And that's what I would like to do. It's also because of the amazing staff. I'm just continually amazed by this agency and the leadership team. And I'm excited to see what we can do in the years to come. Because of our mission, I get to protect Oregon's environment every day in my job, and it doesn't really get better than that. And that's coming from someone who grew up in Ohio. So I'm really sometimes astonished that I'm here in Oregon and that every day I get to get up and work for the state of Oregon, for Oregon's environment, with all of the, communities and businesses that really, want abundant natural resources protected here. It's an awesome job. And learning at DEQ is still exciting to me. It's still exciting every day. And so I come at this from a place of humility and gratitude for all that I get to experience. And I know that I have a lot more learning ahead of me, but that's part of the excitement about the position. So thank you for considering my candidacy.
Thank you very much, Leah, for spending this time with us and addressing these questions. We really appreciate it. You know that we have a series of steps before us and a long afternoon, but we will be getting back to you before too long.
Right. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. So all of our afternoon sessions are executive sessions. And so at this time, we're going to go and get underway with that with an executive session working lunch. So Stephanie, would you make any necessary announcements and then when appropriate, stop the recording?
Thank you, Chair George. Yes, for people in our room, we will stop the recording. This afternoon is a series of executive sessions which are not open to the public. some executive sessions will include specific invited guests, and we will ensure that they are brought back into the space at that time. At this time, Chair George, I will close the recording for today's public element of the EQC special meeting.
Thank you very much.